In 1956, McDonald's was barely making ends meet on hamburgers. The margin on a 15-cent burger was so thin that no one could ever have built a company on it. Harry Sonborn, the man Ray Kroc brought in to sort out the finances, found the answer in an unexpected place: the land underneath the restaurants. Sonneborn rebuilt McDonald's around real estate. The company would buy or lease the land, then charge franchisees rent on top of their franchise fees. Today, McDonald's owns billions of dollars in property. Modern business schools still cite the Sonneborn strategy as one of the clearest examples of leverage in business history. People usually miss this detail. Everyone knows the story of how Ray Kroc built an entire empire selling nothing but hamburgers, and they measure success by that template alone. Not a bad picture. But the fortune was actually built a different way. The drive to work harder isn't a mistake, but it's far from the whole truth about success. Effort without a system behind it produces income. It rarely produces an asset. That distinction sits at the root of almost every misunderstanding people carry about business. Henry Ford didn't ask his workers to move faster. In 1913, he installed a moving assembly line at his Highland Park plant. He simply started acting himself. Before the line, assembling a Model T chassis took roughly 12.5 hours. After it, the same task took about 90 minutes. Nobody on that line worked any harder than before. Ford simply changed the rules of the process, and the output sped up on its own, several times over. This same trick sits behind almost every large fortune built in the last century. A process rebuilt, so a company's success no longer depends on the burnout or effort of one worker. In 1896, the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto noticed that roughly 80% of the land in Italy belonged to about 20% of the population. Researchers later found the same disproportionate pattern in company revenue, in customer complaints, in almost any system where the result isn't evenly distributed. The lesson has nothing to do with Italy or the year 1896. A small number of decisions, products, or processes tend to generate most of the results in any business. Owners who understand that stop treating every task as equally important. They put their attention on the small fraction of work that actually moves the business forward. That's the real difference. Successful entrepreneurs go looking for leverage points, while everyone else just creates the appearance of activity inside the system. Business runs on a handful of ideas that sound true, but don't hold up. Here are the 4 traps that cost entrepreneurs the most. The first is the myth that a founder has to personally run every part of the company. Business author Michael Gerber described this in his book, The E-Myth, as the fatal assumption that someone skilled at the technical work of a business is automatically equipped to run it. A baker who opens a bakery knows how to bake bread. Payroll, bookkeeping, and supplier negotiations require completely different skills. When one person tries to grab hold of everything at once, the business can only grow as large as their own calendar allows. The second myth costs just as much, that rising revenue always means rising profit. In 2019, WeWork filed to go public with billions of dollars in annual revenue. Investors examined the losses hiding underneath that revenue, and the offering collapsed before it ever happened. The company's valuation fell by tens of billions of dollars within months. It matters to understand the difference between revenue and profit. Revenue measures how much money moves through a business. Profit measures how much of it the business actually keeps. The third myth: success comes fast. Amazon was founded in 1994 and didn't post its first annual profit until 2003. Nearly a decade later. All those years, Jeff Bezos reinvested almost everything into warehouses, logistics, and technology, choosing long-term dominance of the market over quick profit right now. The company most people today consider unstoppable spent 9 years looking, by conventional measures, like a failure. The fourth, and maybe the most expensive, the myth that a system once built never needs to change again. Kodak's own engineer, Steven Sasson, built the first digital camera in 1975. Kodak's leadership shelved it, protecting a film business that had funded the company's dominance for decades. By 2012, that film business was almost gone, and the digital photography market Kodak once held the patents for belonged to other companies. That same year, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. The business model that carried a company to the top can also be the one that destroys it, if the need to reorganize it gets ignored. Ray Kroc died in 1984. The company kept growing for 4 more decades under executives who never met him, still running on the real estate structure Sonborn had designed. That's the real test for any system. Not whether it works while its founder is watching, whether it keeps working once they're gone. Not every system passes that test on its own. In 1993, IBM posted a loss of roughly $8 billion, the largest in American corporate history up to that point. The company had built its identity around selling mainframe computers, and that market was collapsing right under it. Lou Gerstner took over as CEO that year. He didn't try to build a better mainframe. He rebuilt IBM around services, helping companies run the technology they already owned instead of selling them new machines every few years. Within 3 years, IBM was profitable again. Gerstner ran the company until 2002 and later described the shift in his own book, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? Toyota's founder, Kiichiro Toyota, launched the company in 1937. After the Second World War, an engineer named Taiichi Ono began refining a method for eliminating waste on the factory floor. It became known as the Toyota Production System, and it gave line workers the authority to stop production the moment they spotted a defect. He wasn't the company's founder. He built his system decades after Toyota started, and generations of employees kept refining it long after he retired. By 2008, Toyota passed General Motors to become the world's largest automaker by production volume, a position built on a system almost nobody outside the company could see. 3 companies, 3 different systems. None of them survived by staying exactly as they were originally built at the founding stage. McDonald's real estate structure outlived Kroc. IBM's services model replaced the business Gerstner inherited. Toyota's production system kept getting refined by people who never even saw the man who created it. The tools keep changing. Ledgers became spreadsheets. Assembly lines became software. The same overhaul is happening again right now, as companies rebuild their operations around ecosystems that can do what used to require an entire department. A system that never changes eventually collapses, but a system that stays open to criticism, doubt, and improvement outlives its own creator. Video rental used to be a real estate business, the same way McDonald's had quietly become one decades earlier. Blockbuster didn't just rent movies. It sold shelf space, foot traffic, and the convenience of a store on nearly every corner in America. In 2000, Netflix's founders proposed a deal. Blockbuster would acquire Netflix for $50 million. Blockbuster's leadership turned it down. At the time, the decision made sense on paper. Blockbuster ran thousands of stores, and every one of them was a tool. Prime locations, foot traffic, and a brand built over 2 decades of dominating video rental. Streaming didn't need any of that. A subscriber could reach Netflix's entire catalog without ever walking into a building. The same real estate that had made Blockbuster the largest video rental chain in the country turned into the burden that kept it from moving fast enough. Keeping thousands of physical stores running cost money whether customers walked through the door or not. Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in 2010. Leverage isn't a fixed asset. It's a relationship between a system and the market it operates in, and that relationship can flip without warning. The 1,000 stores that protected Blockbuster from smaller competitors for 15 years turned into 1,000 reasons it couldn't compete with a company that had none. Amazon hit a similar fork in the road and made a different choice. By the early 2000s, The company had built enormous internal computing infrastructure just to run its own retail operation. Servers, storage, and the systems needed to process millions of orders every holiday season. Instead of treating that infrastructure as a private cost buried inside the company, Amazon turned it into a separate product. It launched Amazon Web Services in 2006, renting out the same computing power it had already built for itself to any company willing to pay for it. AWS didn't compete with Amazon's retail business. It multiplied the value of a system the company had already paid to build once. Both companies ran into the same underlying question: whether the thing that built their advantage still served the business, or had quietly become something that needed rebuilding. Blockbuster held on to its stores. Amazon rented out its servers. One decision preserved a business. The other created an entirely new one, inside a company nobody expected it from. That's the question every business eventually has to face about its own leverage. Is it still working for us? Or are we just protecting it out of habit? Sonneborn saw real estate where Kroc saw hamburgers. Ford saw a process where his workers saw a task. Bezos saw a decade of infrastructure where the market saw a company failing to turn a profit. Gerstner saw a services company where IBM's board saw a dying hardware business. Reed Hastings saw a subscription service where Blockbuster saw an offer not worth $50 million. Amazon's own engineers saw a rentable product where the rest of the company saw an internal cost. None of them worked harder than their competitors. They studied the same market their competitors did, but judged it from a completely different angle. The real leverage point is built by that question. It decides success more than effort ever does, and more than any lucky break.